All right, to the show. So, Philosophy for Freedom and Flourishing is the name of this conference, and there's something that we're taking for granted right in that name, right? Freedom and flourishing. These are allegedly good things, right? Otherwise we would not be here considering what is philosophy that can help us support, pursue, protect these things. So I want to talk about that assumption. Is it true that flourishing and freedom are good? Is it true that we should pursue a life of flourishing? And is it true that we should aim for a free society, that freedom is a good thing? Now notice the word should and good. These are moral terms. This is a moral question. Either it's true that we should pursue a life of flourishing and that we should establish and maintain a free society, or it's not true. Law of excluded middle, it's one or the other. So if it is true, then it would be really helpful to understand why it's true. Because then we have psychological confidence in our pursuit of flourishing. We know we're doing the right thing. We can defend the idea that we're pursuing flourishing. Likewise for freedom. If we know that we should be free, that's a moral fact that we should be free, then we have a whole lot more confidence in our efforts to establish and maintain freedom. There's a big difference here between knowing and not knowing whether there is a science underlying these things, whether there is fact and logic in support of these ideas. Now we're here, a large audience of 220 people roughly, and we have different levels of knowledge about these ideas. So I want to point out that we're here to learn regardless of our stage of knowledge. The idea is to sharpen your mind, right? One of the taglines is sharpen your mind, fuel your soul, excel in life, fight for liberty. That's what we're here to do. And so if you know a lot of what I'm going to cover today and what some of the other speakers are going to cover, that's fine, because when you hear it again from another perspective, you just fortify your knowledge, you deepen your understanding, you broaden the context in which you can both understand and convey these ideas to others. So bear with me and the other speakers if we cover ground that you're somewhat familiar with. And those of you who are new, I think that all of the speakers will be speaking at a level that speaks to you as well. So I don't think anything's going to be going over any newbies' heads, so to speak. So back to freedom and flourishing. I want to start by talking about what these things are, because we can't determine whether there are facts and logic to support them until we know what they are. And then I want to talk about the cultural context in which we ask this question. What is the general idea about these two things within which we start to investigate whether there's a science here? So we'll start with flourishing. What is this thing? Well, by flourishing, we mean, and I'm not going to try to give a definition, I want to give a description. By flourishing, we tend to mean a life where you are growing and learning and engaging in activities that make your life the best life it can be. Flourishing is a process. It's a process of pursuing and gaining the values that make your life wonderful. It involves not only material values, having a great home and having sufficient funds to pursue, purchase the things that you need, and having health care when you need it, and having vacation time, and kayaks and skis and whatever things you use for recreation. It's a big, big concept, flourishing. It involves an enormous number of physical things And it also involves, for human beings, we're not flowers or frogs, so we have not only material needs, but we have deep spiritual needs. Part of flourishing is having the self-esteem, the kind of spiritual values like a purpose in life and meaning in the way that you live your days, friendships, romantic love. There's all sorts of spiritual values that go into living a full, complete human life. And this is all part of flourishing. So flourishing is a really rich idea. It's this robust, thriving state of life. But it's not just a state, it's a process because it's an ongoing thing. So in talking about flourishing, we're talking about pursuing the values that make human life the very best it can be. And since each of us is an individual, it means pursuing our own personal values that would make our personal lives the very best that they can be. So that's what this thing is. Now, what is freedom? Freedom is not a process, it's a condition. Freedom is the condition in which you are free from force, free from coercion. It means nobody's pointing a gun at your head and telling you you must do this. It means no one is strapping you to a tree or throwing you into a concentration camp or telling you that you must pursue this career and you may not pursue that career, or that you must give some of your hard-earned money to people who didn't earn that money. So freedom is the absence of physical force. It's the absence of coercion. If somebody points a gun to my head and tells me that I must do such and such, I'm not free in that moment. If I'm living under a government that is dictating everything I must do, as the people in North Korea and Venezuela are suffering today, and Iran, this is not freedom, so this is force. Freedom and force it's a perceptual level distinction here. As Ayn Rand once put it, it's the difference between a punch in the face and a not punch in the face, right? So there's a fairly clear concept here. Freedom is the absence of force, and what freedom enables you to do, incidentally, is to pursue a life of flourishing, right? So if you're free, if you're not being forced by anybody to act against your judgment or to act against the goals that you want to pursue, then you're able to pursue a life of flourishing. So that's the relationship between these two values. One is a process, the other is a condition that makes that process possible. So that's what these things are in essence, and none of this is too new, but I just wanted to get a clear statement of what these are on the table. Now, what is the context in which we look at these in today's world? Specifically, what's the moral context? What does the conventional, traditional view of morality have to say about these things? Let's take them one at a time. Flourishing. So a person is flourishing. He's doing everything he can to make his life the very best that it can be. He's pursuing values. He's trying to gain values. He's trying to grow materially and spiritually. And that's all he's trying to do, because that's what the process is. Now, what does conventional morality say about a person who seeks to make his life the best it can be and to grow and to focus only on making his life the very best it can be? There's a term for this kind of activity. It's self-interested, or maybe selfishness, some people call it. So what does conventional morality say about this? I've got water up here somewhere. Give me 1 second. Before I dive into what conventional morality says about this, I have to wet the whistle. Well, let's look at it. So, traditional morality is the idea that being moral consists in self-sacrificially serving others, or selflessly serving others. The name for this idea today is altruism. Alter means other. Altruism means otherism. It means that you should live for others. The man who coined the term, the philosopher who coined the term, Auguste Comte, said that altruism means that you have a constant duty, which means an unchosen obligation, to live for others, which means you have to sacrifice your values, the things that would make your life great, so that others can prosper on the basis of that. So it's about sacrifice, the idea that sacrifice is good and self-interest is bad. And he was adamant about this. Now, he did not invent the idea, he just coined that term. The idea that sacrifice is good goes way back in history, of course, and it brings us to, it goes back further than this, but we'll go back just to Christianity for a minute. So, who is, according to Christianity, the most moral man who ever lived? That would be Jesus. And what is the symbol of Jesus that we think of when we think about how moral he is? On the cross. Jesus on the cross. Why is he on the cross suffering? Because he sacrificed for our sins. He sacrificed himself, his life, for our sins. Sacrifice, according to this religion, is the ultimate good. It's the best thing you could do. To be the very best you means to sacrifice. And that's what this idea means. Then, this is not only in the New Testament, it's in the Old Testament as well. Why is it that Abraham in the Old Testament is regarded as an absolute hero by all three monotheistic religions? What is it that he did that was so remarkable? He was willing to sacrifice his son Isaac, whom he loved, which is made explicit that he loved him. Not that he thought his kid was bad, and, you know. And the idea was that God told him to sacrifice his son, and Abram was willing to do it, lifted the knife. An angel was sent down by God to tell him God was just kidding. He didn't mean it. But the reason that Abram is regarded as a hero is because he was willing to sacrifice his son. There's no getting around the fact that religious morality, if we're talking about the three major monotheistic religions, is all about sacrifice. That's what the good is, according to that. So this is very contrary to the idea that we should flourish. There's a problem here. Now, what about the secular moralities in the mix here? So take utilitarianism. What does utilitarianism mean? This is the idea that being moral means acting for the greatest good of the greatest number. It's not about you, it's not about the individual, it's about the group. Not only a small group, but everybody, the biggest group of all. So it's another form of groupism. It's a you must sacrifice for others. If the greatest good means that you have to give up something against your will or against your better judgment or whatever, then that's what you should do. So this is another sacrificial morality, utilitarianism. What about egalitarianism? Egalitarianism is the idea that you should sacrifice for anyone who has less opportunity or less wealth than you have. The idea is to equalize. Until we have equal, everything is wrong. How do you equalize? You take from the people who have more and give it to the people who don't until everyone has the same. Someone has to sacrifice. Environmentalism, another secular version of this. What's the standard of moral value in environmentalism? Nature untouched by man. How do you live up to that standard? You sacrifice, you give up, you stop using the fuels that you need in order to live. You stop cutting down trees in order to make paper bags, et cetera, et cetera. You sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. So, as we can see, there's a real issue here between the goal of flourishing and traditional morality. Now, what if there was a science that showed us that the traditional view of morality is not right? What if there were facts and logic and reality-based principles that told us that the standard of moral value is not sacrifice, but gain, and specifically gain for human beings in order to flourish? What if there was what if the whole thing just got turned upside down and the facts supported the idea that according to observation, evidence, logic, and just like physics works, or just like engineering works, or just like any other science, what if the thing was supported by facts and logic such that we could have moral certainty that pursuing a life of flourishing is what we should do? There's the should again, right? So this would be a game changer. It would not only give us the moral certainty that enables us to go after things full bore, so it would give us, we wouldn't feel guilty if we were going after a life of flourishing. We would feel good. We'd be like, oh, I'm doing the right thing. This is exactly what I should be doing. Also, existentially, it would make a difference, because then we would go after full bore after the things that make our lives great. And what would that effect be? How much better is your life if you're going 100% to pursue your values with no sacrifice, just gain good relationships with other people who want to produce and trade and flourish, etc. And that's the MO of everyone? We're all doing that? That's a different world. That's a different world. So hold that thought about is there a science here? And let's move on to freedom. What does traditional morality say about freedom? Well, if it's true that everyone should sacrifice, if that's the right thing to do, what about a society that says, hey, you can do anything you want, you can pursue your goals with your own judgment exactly the way you want to pursue them. The only thing you can't do is harm other people. But other than that, you can be as selfish and self-interested and pursue flourishing completely. Well, that's capitalism. That's the idea. That's basically selfishness being completely legalized, 100%. No one can force you not to flourish in any form or degree. Zero force, right? So that's not gonna go well with traditional morality. If you're supposed to sacrifice, if that's what being moral is, then when you get to the political level and you're trying to figure out what's the right political system, it's going to be very difficult to justify, hey, let's have a political system that legalizes self-interest and that lets everybody live without any sacrifice at all. That's not going to work. What systems would support that idea? Well, socialism. Socialism is the idea that the standard of moral values, broadly speaking, is society, hence socialism. You should live for society, sacrifice for society, and whatever society needs from you in order for that big alleged organism to flourish and thrive, you'll have to give up. So there's no individual flourishing there. Communism is essentially the same thing. The community is the standard, hence communism, and you must sacrifice for the community. What about fascism? Fasci means group. It's another groupism. You must sacrifice for the group, the state, the nation. What about theocracy? You must sacrifice for the god or for the God's spokesman on earth. Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. And if that's the right thing to do, if that's what you should do, and if everybody thinks that that's what you should do, you're going to have a society that mandates it. There's just no getting around that, one way or another, against this value. It's not for this value. It's against. But what if we could see evidence, facts, and logic that supported the idea that we should be free? That it's wrong for people to initiate force against us and stop us from acting on our judgment? What if instead of thinking that this right to freedom came either from God or from government or somehow from nature and we know not how, what if we actually did know how? What if we all knew exactly how rights come from nature, exactly why freedom, as a matter of scientific fact, is the correct condition for human beings? And what if the entire liberty movement understood that science? How much stronger would the liberty movement be? What's the effect of moral certainty in this context. It's enormous. This is a game changer. So the question is there a science that supports the idea that flourishing is the right thing to do and that freedom is the right condition for man? Now, obviously, I believe there is, and I think most of you believe there is. And it's not just that we believe there is, it's that we know something about this science already. I think most of you do, maybe some don't. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the framework that I think is the best way to hold these ideas, or not, maybe not the best way, but a very good way to hold these ideas and to approach this idea. So now we're looking at two things here. We're going to look at morality and politics. We're going broader than flourishing and freedom, because morality is about what we should do, and it's kind of undecided whether we should be flourishing or not. And politics is about when and how force can be justified, and then the question is open there, whether freedom is right. Well, at the moral level, if we ask, well, how do you get morality from facts? That's the question. How do you get morality scientifically from observation and logic? And if you know the history of philosophy, something's coming into mind right here. Can you get values from facts? Can you get an ought from an is? Can you get moral principles from the facts of reality? Well, according to traditional morality, you cannot. This dates back to the sophists in ancient Greece, but it was popularized by David Hume, the 18th century Scottish philosopher, who came up with a terminology that is popular today, which is that you cannot derive an ought from an is. And this is called the is-ought gap, or the fact-value gap. And the reason that Hume held this is because he said, well, look around. People come up, they'll say, you ought to do this, or you should do that. And then you look around and you say, well, all I can see are facts. I don't see any oughts. Wherever you look, the only place you're going to find an ought is in here, in your sentiments. I feel that he should not do that. I feel that she should do that. So if you see a man raping a woman, you're not seeing that somebody doing something he shouldn't do. What you're seeing in terms of facts is just a woman struggling and a man eagerly trying to have sex with her. But there's no ought or should about this. Those are just facts. The only place you can find an ought is in your feeling. Right? This is pure subjectivism in ethics. And because people think you can't get an ought from an is, subjectivism persists. And because people know viscerally on some level that, hey, we need moral absolutes, where do they turn if you can't get them from reality? God. Following Hume came Immanuel Kant, who agreed substantially with Hume about this is-ought thing, but Kant said, although it's true that you can't get any oughts from this world, this phenomenal world, as he called it, you can get oughts from the noumenal world, which is another dimension. Now, you've never been there, but Kant did. He went there, apparently, because he came back and he said, I got your oughts here. And unremarkably, the oughts that he came back with, and he has a footnote about this in one of his works on ethics, where he says, why would anyone try to come up with another moral code when we already know what's moral? The question isn't which is the right moral code. We know that. It's altruism. The question is, how do we justify it? Well, he justified it by bringing back this news. And so if that sounds a lot like another idea that where there's another dimension where morality comes from, right? So this is Christianity again, right? And Kant was Christian. And so he basically tried to secularize the Christian ethics. But what we landed with was just another version of you have to sacrifice, because the thing he brought back was conventional morality is true, and reason tells us that. It's very difficult to understand how reason tells us that, so we got to write very long books with sentences you can't read. But take my word for it, because I'm the philosopher, and it's true. So there you have it. Well, this goes on and on. Kant published his most famous book in 1776, the same year the United States was founded, a critique of pure reason. And so it was a fairly volatile time, because now you've got this guy publishing that book. You've got the founding fathers saying, hey, we think people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what's the pursuit of happiness? That's flourishing. That's pretty much a synonym for flourishing. So we get a country being founded on the idea that you should be able to flourish. At the same time that we have all of these philosophies coming to a head saying, you can't do that, that's wrong. Volatile mix. So the United States starts, and it starts out pretty good except for the slavery problem, but then we solve that, right? We get rid of that horrific situation, and things are pretty good for a while, and then things start to go downhill. Why? Well, you're supposed to sacrifice, and people aren't really sacrificing. So we're going to pass some laws that make everybody sacrifice, and we'll fix this thing. But then people weren't sacrificing enough. So after the beginning of the antitrust laws, then we get to some other laws about banking, and then we have health care, and then Social Security, and on and on and on, and we all know the story. It just rolls from one sacrifice by force to another to another. And what justifies it all? You should sacrifice. That's the fact. Well, here's a framework on how to look at this very, very differently. Ayn Rand came up with a completely different approach to morality, and thus a different approach to freedom. Because when we're talking about freedom, there's the idea that you should be free. If you focus on free, it looks like this is all about politics. But if you focus on should, you can see that this is a moral idea. You should be free, right? So her ethics gives rise to a certain kind of should that affects politics directly. And what Rand did, and I'm going to give a framework now for what I think is a really good way to think about Rand's ideas. And it's going to be a brief framework because you're going to hear a lot more about this throughout this conference. Carrie-Ann Biondi is going to speak about this in depth, not only Rand's ideas, but Aristotle's ideas and how they relate. So she's going to go into much more depth, as are the other speakers from multiple different angles. The big integration at this conference is, we're looking at philosophy for freedom and flourishing, and there's a lot of stuff involved in this. So we're looking at it from multiple angles, and you're going to hopefully see a massive integration here. But the framework I want to talk about is this. When Ayn Rand approached ethics, she didn't look out there like Kant did and say, well, which ethics are out there? Oh, there's one. Let's take Christianity, and we'll just say that's good. She didn't do that. She said, no, let's step back. Let's ask some really fundamental questions. First of all, if we're going to pursue something, we better figure out whether we need it or not. Do we need ethics? Do we need morality? If we need morality, then the reason why we need it is going to point a lot or shed a lot of light on what's the good morality, right? Because think about it. If an engineer is trying to figure out how to build a building, and he wants to put up a second floor, so he's going to ask himself, should we use a post and beam? Or what do we need to hold up the second floor, right? Well, we need a post and beam. Needs are part of science. You're thinking about what you need to get this thing accomplished. We need a post and beam. Well, what are we going to put the post and beam in? Well, we need a foundation, right? So if you backtrack the thinking process in engineering, you see that this is all about need. It's about what you need. Well, what do human beings need? Do we need values? Do we need morality? Rand began with these questions, and it's a scientific question. Either we need values or we don't. Either we need morality and oughts and the like, or we don't. Which is it? So she stepped back and she followed the answers to these questions and the thought processes that came up. And this is what changed entirely not only her view of ethics, but whether or not you can bridge the is-ought gap, whether or not you can get values from facts. Because as soon as you start asking this question, what are values and why does man need them, as she put it, you look out and you say, well, okay, first of all, let's get clear, what are these things? Because morality is a code of values to guide our choices and actions. The central term there is values. We better know what those are before we start figuring out whether we need a whole code of these things. There's no point in doing a code of this thing we don't need. So what are values? And then she asks, she looks around, and she sees, well, values are things that people act to gain and keep, right? The money, education, romance, a relationship with God for people who go to church. Whatever the things that people go after to gain and keep, freedom. People go after freedom. The founding fathers took a lot of action to gain and keep freedom, right? These are what values are. Now, do we need these things? And then Rand starts to look around and looks, being scientific, she looks around in nature and she, well, look, human beings are not the only thing that go after values. Other animals do too. Whales, tigers, antelope, frogs, birds, you name it. They're going after things. They go after values too. I wonder if they need them. Plants shoot their roots into the ground, turn their leaves toward the sky. They're pursuing values of some sort. They're going after things. Rand keeps going, and she starts to see that there's a reason that these living things pursue values. She notes that the concept of value presupposes a valuer, a thing to whom the thing is of value, and then a reason that it's of value, to whom and a for what, as she put it. A value must be a value to something, the thing pursuing the value, and it must be a value for some end. What difference does it make whether a living thing achieves its values or not? What happens if a tiger gets the antelope or misses it? What happens if the snake catches the mouse or doesn't? What happens for the mouse if it gets away? Likewise for human beings. She looked at this. This is scientific. This is looking at the facts. And what she realized is that only living things pursue values. Non-living things don't. Rocks, rivers, and hammers don't go after values. They just sit there until some outside force moves on them. But living things do. This is a self-generated, goal-directed action that living things take. Why do they do this? What's the end? What's the ultimate end they're trying to serve? And with this thought process, and I'm giving it very short shrift here because I just want to give you the framework of Rand's idea. With this thought process, she starts to realize they're all going after life. They're all trying to live. And she notes in her mind, there's only one fundamental alternative. There's only one fundamental difference maker here, and that is remaining in existence or going out of existence. And the only kinds of things that face this fundamental alternative, the why does this matter, the what for, in the question to whom and what for, the fundamental difference is remaining in existence or going out of existence. And the only thing that can go out of existence is life. Material can't go out of existence. It can change forms. You can smash a rock. You can burn wood. But these things just change form. The material doesn't go completely out of existence. Life can go out of existence. And she realizes that this means that the ultimate value for any living thing is its life. Well, the ultimate value, that's the end goal. That's the final thing. Oh, that's the standard. That's the standard by which we can evaluate all of the other actions that a living thing takes. Why is the antelope good for the tiger? Because it sustains the tiger's life. Why is it good for the mouse to get away from the snake? Because then the mouse can continue to live, and so on. And the same is true for human beings. We, of course, have free will, so it changes the complexity of this, but it doesn't change the fact that the reason that we need values is in order to live. And so Rand finally comes to this conclusion. The only reason we need values is to remain alive, and the only reason we can pursue values is because we are alive. Only living things can pursue values, and only living things need to pursue values, and the ultimate reason we need to pursue values is in order to live. Life, she realizes, is the standard of value. Life, and the life of a given organism is its proper standard. We're not gnats. We don't live for a day. We're human beings. We can live for decades. We're also not just physical beings. We're physical and spiritual beings. We have intellectual needs, emotional needs, all sorts of things. So for us to live as human beings fully means to take all of that into account and to live in that manner. In other words, to flourish, to live fully, to grow as the kind of thing that we are. a rational animal, an animal that lives by means of reason, that pursues its values by identifying them as matters of fact that sustain and support his life, and that enable us to have all of the material and spiritual values that make our lives wonderful. What's not to like? It's science. It's true. We can see that it's true. You can't see it just in what I'm saying here. But if you read Rand's works, and others who have elaborated and sort of got, built some flesh around some of these ideas with more examples, you can see that this is true. There is a science here. And if it's true that we should flourish, if it's a fact that that's what we should do, if that's what science says, if that's what fact, because look, when people say you must sacrifice, here's a good question for them that Rand points out. Why? Where are the facts that say I should sacrifice? Go look for those. You're not going to find them. There are no facts of reality that give rise to the need of human sacrifice. There's nothing in the fabric of the universe or the nature of human beings that says, hey, you have to sacrifice. You got to give up your values. Or what? Or I'll suffer? No. If I don't give up my values, I'm going to live beautifully. If I do give up my values, I'm going to suffer. Why would I do that? Where's the why? Where's the answer to that why? There is no answer. No one has ever. This is why I like to point out, there is no is-ought dichotomy. There's an is-altruism dichotomy. You can't get altruism from reality. That's a fact. And that's why this is-ought business has persisted for so long. Look at Jordan Peterson today in these debates with others in the intellectual dark web. He insists that you cannot get values from facts. Therefore, the only place we can get values from is mythology, religious ideology, things like this, and all of that, according to him. And now he's trying to bring another kind of science into this, because he's saying this is all rooted in the nature of human beings and the fact that suffering is the essence of life, and that what we have to do is we have to turn to the traditional ideas and really understand those and integrate them, et cetera, et cetera. This is a whole new wave of the same old, same old. It's like Kant trying to justify sacrifice. But the fact is there are, and why do these guys speak in such incomprehensible language when they go there? For the same reason that Kant did. You can't get the requirement of sacrifice from the facts of reality. It isn't there. What's there is life and the requirements of life. The goal of flourishing and the means to flourishing. And if we should flourish, if that's a fact, then we need a political condition that enables that. That's what freedom is. It's a fact that freedom is correct because it's what enables the deeper thing that's correct, the goal of flourishing. So there really is a science here. And again, I haven't given you the whole science. This is just a framework to think about it. But I think one of the really important things to bear in mind about Ayn Rand's view, and she's not the only one who thought at all in this direction, as Carrie Ann is going to point out. Aristotle had a lot to say about this. And other thinkers did too. Richard Salzman is going to point out that the economist Jean-Baptiste Say had a lot in common with Rand on these kinds of issues in terms of a fact-based view of science and living and the like. So Rand's not the only one who came up with these ideas. What she did is she integrated a massive amount of this stuff and put it together in a way that created an entire system that all makes sense, or at least it does to me. Whether it does to you, for anybody who's not familiar with these ideas yet, you have to decide that. Science is not something that comes down from on high. Science is something that you have to understand with your own mind. So I want to make one or two final points. While you're here at this conference, and while you're anywhere talking about philosophic ideas, bear in mind two things: what it means to understand something, and what it means for something to make sense. I like to think of the idea of understanding something as you think about this idea, and to understand it, you have to know what stands under it. Understand. If you're an engineer and you want to know why that floor is standing, You look underneath and you see, oh, there are these beams and there are these columns and they're anchored in this foundation. That's what understanding means. It means you know what is under the thing you claim to possess knowledge about. What does it mean for something to make sense? It means for the idea, the abstraction, to make it to the sensory level. All the way down to the ground, you see, oh, there are the facts. If the tiger does catch the antelope, the tiger lives. If the tiger never catches an antelope, the tiger dies. We're at the perceptual level. Likewise with a plant. Plant gets water and sunlight, lives. Plant not get water, sunlight, die. Right? So all of this is anchored in perceptual reality, but unless you can see that it is, unless you see that it makes sense, you should not accept it. There's a beautiful fact about reality-based philosophies, whether it's Aristotelian or Ayn Rand or anybody in that area, which is this. These are the only philosophies that say, if you don't understand something, you shouldn't accept it. If it doesn't make sense to you, you shouldn't accept it. It would be a vice to accept it. It would be wrong. It would be morally wrong to accept an idea if you don't understand it. And this is really crucial, especially for you younger folks, and you're getting into these ideas, and you're going to hear, if you're in college or something like that, you're going to hear multiple different ideas. And some of them are going to sound pretty crazy, and then they're going to have some big conclusion. And when you're listening to Jordan Peterson and people like that, this is a really good place to keep this in mind. Either you see how it makes sense and you understand it, or you don't. Which one is it? If you don't, that's a good time to say to yourself, at the very least, I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Kick it out. Until maybe somebody brings some more evidence to light on the idea, and then maybe you will accept it. But it's got to make sense to you. It has to make it to the sensory level. It's got to have the framework that gives rise to and supports the idea. That's what science is. Science is precisely a body of principles about an aspect of reality that explains reality by bringing it to the perceptual level. Or you can think about science as a study of an area of life with that as the goal, trying to understand it. You can think of it either way, but that's essentially what science is. So whether or not morality is a science, and then again, whether or not freedom is properly the thing that the political condition that we should have, this is just a matter of fact, one way or the other. And we should strive to understand for ourselves rather than have somebody tell you the way it is, and use which nobody in here is going to do that, but so many people. And they do because they're raised to do it. You go to Sunday school, you're told the Bible is true, but it doesn't make sense, but you're supposed to accept it anyway. So when people are raised with this, and it's not just there, things like environmentalism or egalitarianism or utilitarianism, the secular versions of this stuff are just as bad. You're supposed to accept it because somebody standing up on the stage or somebody with some kind of a title told you it's true. Well, that's nonsense. Exactly nonsense. Literal nonsense, meaning it doesn't make it to the sensory level. If it doesn't make it to the sensory level, it's not true. It's that simple. So, as we pursue flourishing in life and try to point out to others that this is the right goal, and as we try to defend freedom and point out to others that it's a moral fact that people should be free, try to bear in mind this framework of Rand and the other elements that you're going to learn at this conference. The question of, do we need this thing or not? And if so, why? Because that's the thing, this is the linchpin of the whole scientific issue. And if people say, well, you're bringing in human needs, so it can't be a science, remind them of engineering. Why do we need this stuff under the third floor and the second floor and the first floor and into the foundation? Needs are not, science does not exclude needs. In fact, no science would exist if human beings didn't need knowledge. All sciences are based on needs. I could go on at length about that. But the easiest way to see this is with either engineering or medicine, right? How do you know which things are good? Well, what do people need in order to survive? How do you know which medicines are good? You know by asking what we need in order to live. The science is based on a need. So when people try to kick science out, which Jordan Peterson does, this is, again, this is the idea where you're bringing in human needs. And then he breaks it into Darwinian versus Newtonian sciences, as if there's some big gulf there. There is no gulf. There's science and there's non-science. There's sense and there's nonsense. And that's what we need to stay focused on. So I hope you find this framework helpful. We're on the cusp of something very big today, because we have these powerful ideas that didn't exist 70 years ago, 75 years ago. And now they do. At least they exist in a new, more integrated form. And because of these ideas and because of the kinds of freedom and technological advancements that have come largely on the basis of these ideas, not necessarily Rand's in particular, but the elements that were good in earlier philosophers that Rand integrated with some new ideas and came up with her philosophy, which I personally think is really true and accurate all the way through. But again, that's for you to decide. But because we live in this time, we live in a time where a real game changer could happen. Not just the economic changes that, say, Steven Pinker talks about in his book. Not just looking at charts and graphs that show that life expectancy is getting longer and quality of life is getting better in various areas. But a moral revolution where we get to say, flourishing is the morally correct thing for everybody to strive for, and freedom is the morally correct condition that enables us to do it. If we know that, and we know the science, and if we can spread that science and help others understand it, this will change everything. Thank you for that. Okay, I think we have about 15 minutes for questions.
Good.
Good luck.
Hi, thank you for the talk.
Hello, Gina.
So what do you say to the people who say, yes, we agree that life is the standard of value, but this poor man's life and this orphan child's life, we care about that too, and that's why you should sacrifice?
Very good question. So the question, just to make sure everybody heard, is if life is the standard of value and we see a poor person or somebody who's really down and out and not thriving for some reason, what do you say about him if we're not supposed to sacrifice for him? Well, the best way to think about this is to go right to the base again. What is it that this person lacks that he needs? Values. He needs values. He needs food, clothing, shelter. He needs self-esteem. He needs purpose. He needs all sorts of values. That's why he's down there, because he doesn't have those things. If he had those things, he'd be up here with us, right? He'd be enjoying. So how does somebody get those things? Is the only way to get them for me to take them from him and give them to him? No. We don't live in a zero-sum world. Value is created. Richard Salzman's going to talk a lot about this with Say's law. How do you have marketplace power? You create values. If you create something, let's say the guy who's down and out goes to the local hardware store, knocks on the window and says, hey, your windows are dirty. I'll tell you what. I need some money. You have dirty windows. If you let me use that Windex and that rag over there, I'll clean your windows. I'll reimburse you for the Windex and the rag use, and then you pay me some money. If I don't do a good job, you can say nay, right? And the guy said, okay, that sounds like a good deal. Clean the windows. Does a good job cleaning the windows. Now he's created a value. What does he get for it? Value in return. What people need who don't have values is they need knowledge about what values are and how you get them, and they need freedom so that they can achieve them. Now, what happens if instead the left-leaning people or the sort of control-minded come along and they say, no, we want to control the producers and make them give the values to the non-producers or whatever? Well, If you control the producers, you stop them from acting on their judgment. Their judgment is precisely what made them producers. So then all of the wealth production comes down. They have less to give in terms of charity or knowledge or education or whatever, which they might have been able to help this guy with. Now they've got to struggle with other things that they didn't have to struggle with when they had lots of money and they were free. And this guy gets nothing. He's not going to get education. There won't be a hardware store for him to wash windows of, et cetera, et cetera. This is not theory. Look at Venezuela. Look at North Korea. None of this is theory. This is, I mean, it's theory too, but it's theory based on observation. So what poor people need is not for wealthier people to be forced to give them stuff. What poor and down and out people need is they need knowledge, they need education, they need for people to give them real education, not the crap that's given in US schools today, real education about how you live, what values are and how to get them, and then they need freedom. Because the people who are unable rely precisely on the people who are able. And if you cripple the people who are able, you bring everybody down, which is the goal of egalitarianism. So, a very good question, thank you. Jack.
About 15 minutes into this speech, I realized he's not looking at anything. He's not reading anything. It's coming out of his head straight. And I think it was a terrific speech.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
How do you respond to the attempts by, let's say, progressives to redefine freedom by saying necessitous men are not free men?
Okay, so the idea that a person in need is not free, that kind of thing, yeah. So there's this effort on, not just on the word freedom, but on many important concepts. Take any crucial concept in philosophy or morality in particular, and there's an assault by somebody trying to change the actual meaning of that thing. So they put social in front of justice, and then then there's no justice in there anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And freedom is certainly one of these words that is attacked. It is a difficult question to answer because it really depends on the honesty of the person that you're dealing with. I mean, if you're dealing with somebody who you think is honest, you can say, well, look, forget about what freedom is supposed to mean right now. If I punch you and kick you to the ground and put my knee on you and tie your hands behind your back and then strap you to a tree and say, try to live, what's the problem here for you? Can you live? Right? No. He can't. So you go, why can't you live? What's the condition that changed? You were able to live a few minutes ago, now you're not. What happened? What's the difference that makes the difference? And you have to bring people down to sort of the perceptual level on this and then say, okay, do we need a concept to distinguish between this earlier condition and this new condition? Well, that's the very distinction that gives rise to the need of the concept of freedom. And so let's keep our concepts tied to the facts that give rise to the need of the concept. If somebody wants to say that a person in need isn't free, you can say, well, wait a minute. I need more money. Are you telling me I'm not free? I have lots of needs. I could say, and does that mean I'm not free? That's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. We have other concepts for people in need. Right? And let's stick with those. So if I need more money, that means that I need to think more clearly or better or longer or in another way about how I might earn money, and then I need to take actions to get it. So you might say I have economic education that I need. There's a need of economic education, but there's no lack of freedom there. Freedom has to be tied to the actual facts that give rise to the need of the concept, and some people aren't honest. And if you get into a conversation with somebody who doesn't want to look at the facts and see when concepts make sense and when they don't, and there's a whole issue here about epistemology because who decides what the words are going to mean, right? And this is another science, incidentally, which Ayn Rand also answered. So how do we define terms correctly, and how do we know that they're defined correctly? And deeper than that, how are concepts formed and all? There's another science there that's equally clear to the one that we're talking about here at the moral level. So we have to know those, or it's very helpful for us to know those so that we can convey things, and then you have to be careful that you don't get into conversations with people who don't want to get to the truth. Because if they don't want to get to the truth, then there's no point in staying in the conversation. Unless you're talking to them and other people are listening and you're trying to establish help other people to hear this conversation and profit from it. But don't stay in a conversation with somebody who's not interested in the truth or honesty. David.
Hi, Craig. Rand has described capitalism as a social system. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Socialism makes sense, or the name socialism, right? The society. Communism makes sense. We live in a commune. We all contribute like a kibbutz. When I hear capitalism, I always hear it in terms of free market.
Yeah.
How does Rand get it from just confined to a free market to an entire social system?
Very good question. So socialism and communism make perfect sense. Socialism, communism, and then we get to capitalism. It's like capital is this economic term, so how is this an ism that's broader than economics? And I can only speculate here because I don't. Rand didn't say a whole lot about why she chose to keep capitalism as the term for the political system that she advocated, or the social system that she advocated. But I can say this: my suspicion is that it was either that or create a neologism, create a new term. But the Marxists had come up with this term, capitalism, to try to use it against us. And I think Rand thought a couple things. First of all, it does point to economics, and it points to producers who are very, very important in both Ayn Rand's philosophy and in Jean-Baptiste Say's philosophy and in any philosophy that's advocating flourishing. Because you have to produce values or you don't have values, right? So there's a huge issue here with the importance of production and the capital, meaning the savings that can go into production. So I think that she figured that what capitalism captured at the time was, in essence, the social system that not only enables trade, but enables trade because it protects individual rights. And so I think that it does, and so she defines capitalism as the social system that is based on individual rights and that protects individual rights by having a government that bans the initiation of force from social relationships and that uses force only in retaliation and only against those who initiate it. Now, that's a longer definition than she's got a more terse one, but I wanted to get all this stuff in. And if that's the way you are defining it, then it makes perfect sense. Could she have come up with a neologism that would have served this purpose? Probably. But she didn't. And I've heard people trying, and I think the reason she didn't is like libertarianism conceivably could have been an alternative, although it's kind of a cumbersome word as well. But the problem there is once an idea is conscripted by a bad philosophy, positivism could have been a good term for a good philosophy. Positive, it's good, progress. Progressivism could be a good term. There's lots of terms that could be good terms, but that went south because somebody got them first and polluted them. And we can't unpollute, all the terms. So, good question. Tully.
So in your summary of American history, you said something like, and then the slaves were freed, and then life got pretty good for a while, and then it got worse. And people unfamiliar with your full context might say something like, yeah, it was a good time to be a white guy, but women still couldn't vote, still not a great time to be black. Certainly like gay rights were still unimaginable. I mean, trans, just,
yeah.
Can you clarify the context of what you meant, and how would you pitch this philosophy to people who do see themselves as part of one of those minority communities?
Excellent point or question. So the thing here, I kind of skipped past some history very quickly because I pointed out that after the Civil War, I don't think I mentioned the Civil War, but the idea was after the Civil War was fought and slaves were freed, and then I said and things got pretty good for a while, and then they started to go south again, and the part where they got pretty good for a while was seriously mixed. And it was. I mean, the big elephant in the room had been substantially fixed. It wasn't totally fixed. There were still cultural problems about blacks and their treatment. Women were still not treated as full citizens. To be gay was still unheard of so there were still issues to come along. But what is the fundamental principle that ultimately solved these problems and that continues to solve problems of this kind today when people grasp it and apply it. The principle of individual rights. So the founders didn't fully understand individual rights. There's an interesting way that history climbs and things get better. The founders didn't understand individual rights the way that we can today, because they held that rights ultimately come from, well, I'll give you the quick. So rights come somehow from nature. We know it's not really clear. So they'll say that they're either self-evident, which is kind of ridiculous because if you look around you can't see them. But if you then say, okay, well, if they're not self-evident, they come from nature somehow. Well, how do they come from nature? Well, there's this moral law that we get from nature, and that moral law gives rise to the idea that you shouldn't use force against other people, and this comes from John Locke. Well, where does that moral law come from? God. So the idea of natural rights in history is the idea that rights ultimately come from God. So the founders didn't even understand rights in the scientific way that we're talking about here. But they understood rights well enough to found the United States on it and to get this idea into a culture, and for that idea to not only found a relatively free country, but then to solve the really big problem of slavery, and then to continue to get better and solve other problems, which it's still solving today. But the principle of individual rights can't solve problems if we lose the understanding of it. And if people just never really get it. Because here's the thing, you'll hear from various people, Jeremy Bentham, the utilitarians, say that the idea of rights is nonsense upon stilts. Why? Because you can't see them. Point them out. Where are they? Cut me open. You can't find rights in there. They're not out there. They're behind a rock, in a crystal. Where do you get them, right? So or take Alistair McIntyre, who says the idea of rights as imprescriptible absolutes like the founders spoke of is one with witches and unicorns, he says. Why? Because there's the same amount of evidence in support of them. Now, when these ideas, and that's just a taste of how the academics treat rights, when these ideas are bearing down on rights, and altruism remains the dominant morality, how long is this thing going to last? It isn't. We have to get to the science of this stuff. We absolutely have to. So the answer to your question in short, though, is that things got better over time, and they're still not right. We're still only partially free. We need full freedom, and the way we get full freedom is by being scientific. Last question, Adam.
Oh boy, thank you. When you answered the question about the poor, what I was thinking is that the poor man's life is a standard of value for him, and my life is a standard of value for me. So when do you find it more effective to use one answer versus the other?
Very good question. So there are multiple ways you can address a question like, what do you do about the poor guys? And you could start with, well, let's just stick with one, let's just get one thing straight right now, which is my life belongs to me and his life belongs to him. That's a perfectly good starting point, and it kind of depends on the context of your discussion. That's a truth, and it's a fundamental truth, so it's a perfectly good starting point. If the person you're talking with is kind of on board with that to some extent, but he's just feeling empathy about these people who are down and out, then you might say, well, look, I can understand that. I mean, who doesn't feel, is there anybody in the room who doesn't feel some empathy when you see somebody and you don't know why he's down and out, you just know that he's down and out, right? So you don't know that he did this to himself. Do you feel bad? Do you feel like, oh, I wish something could come around to help that guy out? Or do any of you give charity to organizations, say, leukemia foundations or educational organizations or the like? So what I would point out to people is, look, you and I, and most of the people we know and hang out with, we aren't unconcerned with people who are having trouble in life. We're very concerned about them. What we should advocate is the fundamental that's most important for them to be able to come up, and that's freedom and the idea that flourishing is good. Because if they don't have even the idea that flourishing is good, why would they get off the ground, right? So the idea that flourishing is good, and then the freedom that would enable them to do that, and that would enable wealth producers to produce wealth, and thus have whatever charity might help that person. And charity is a perfectly legitimate thing, and I give to charity, and I doubt there's a person in this room that hasn't, except maybe some students, who don't give in some way or form to charity. And the reason we can do it is because we're relatively wealthy. We're not as wealthy as we should be. We're not as wealthy as we would be if we were really, really free. I didn't get to the unseen. We talked about the seen. We talked about Venezuela and North Korea and the places you can, some of the problems here. There's this huge unseen that there's so many values that we don't have today that we would have. We might have longer life expectancy. Cancers might be completely cured. Auto accidents might be just completely a thing of the past. There's so many things that a fully free society would have enabled if we had full freedom. So I think the thing to do is make sure that you're in agreement on the fundamental about you own your life, I own my life, but then also go to the empathy. I think it's good to say, hey, look, it's not like we're disconcerted or not concerned at all with people who are down and out. I feel horrible for the people in North Korea and Venezuela and Iran. Look at these people in Iran, the women taking off their scarves and dancing in the streets and then getting thrown in jail because, hey, Allah said you can't do that. I mean, it's 2018 and this is still happening on planet Earth. Why? Because it's not scientific in everybody's mind that it's wrong for that to happen, that freedom is right. So I think the context of the discussion and the person you're talking to sort of dictates this, but there's no one recipe for carrying out these discussions. It's all very contextual. So, but the point you made is also ideal.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all.